Women make up 70% of the healthcare workforce, but only 20% of its leadership. On Her Story, we'll explore the careers of bold and influential women from Silicon Valley to Capitol Hill and learn how they've overcome the odds. This is Her Story, a program where we explore what's beyond the glass ceiling.
Suzanne Youngkin is the First Lady of Virginia, the wife of our governor. And so it's a really wonderful and unique opportunity to talk to you today, Suzanne, and learn a little bit about your story and what all the things that you're doing to empower women in particular. So let's just get right to it. I think I'd like to start by asking a bit about your background. How did you get from, being a little girl, maybe growing up in Virginia, to being the First Lady of Virginia? Can you share a little of that with us?
I would love to. And let me begin by saying thank you, Nancy, A, for creating opportunities for women to connect, even if it's through a screen, and B, for being the phenomenal leader that you are to so many.
Well, you are
pouring
kind.
your life into service and healthcare and leadership. And you serve as one of my role models. So I thank you so, so much. A little bit about myself. I actually grew up in Texas. My parents are both from Texas. And even though I was born in Arkansas, when my father was doing his residency there after medical school, we came back to Texas eventually. And that's where I went to elementary school, middle school, high school, and then college. I graduated from Southern Methodist University in Dallas and took a job in Houston, Texas, shortly thereafter. And it just so happened that Glenn, my husband, had gone to Houston on a basketball scholarship. He went to Rice University. He thought at some point he wanted to be an astronaut. Little did he know that NASA did not accept 6'6" astronauts because they would not fit in any of the capsules or the spaces necessary. But he majored in mechanical engineering, went to work for a financial firm in Houston. And when we were in our mid-20s, a friend introduced us. And we courted for a very short period in Texas, got engaged when Glenn was in business school in Boston. I moved to Boston for his second year of business school, which was a fascinating experience for this small town Texas girl. We were there for a year, got married in 1994, and we're trying to decide whether to be in Texas, where my family was, or in Virginia, where Glenn's family was. And I had worked in Washington, D.C. as an intern in college and thought that it was a pretty dynamic place. And so we settled in Arlington, Virginia as newlyweds, thinking we'd be in the greater DMV, as they call it, for a few years, getting good work experience. And we have been in Virginia for 28 and a half years now as a married couple.
Wow. Are we lucky that we got you in Virginia, moved you back to the South, but not as far south as Texas? That is a great story. And I had not heard that about Glenn wanting to be an astronaut. So great story. Well, not many of us actually have the experience of our husbands or our wives coming to us and saying, you know what, I think I'm going to run for governor. Tell us about what it was like to be on the campaign trail and what the early days of being the First Lady are like.
Well, I'd love to share it with you, Nancy. One of the bits of counsel that I got very early on was to keep a journal, and I did not listen to that counsel. And so most of it is journaled right here. And since this is not quite as sharp as it used to be, I do call on the memories of the last 2 years frequently, though, in awe, because if anyone had ever told me that I would be sitting in the executive mansion in Richmond, Virginia, which is where I am today, our nation's oldest purpose-built governor's mansion built in 1813 and serving the over 8 million Virginians that live here in the Commonwealth as their first lady, I would have never have believed it. I've said to people quite frequently about this journey, we make our plans and God laughs at them. And that is really how I ended up here. I married a young man who I fell in love with because he was passionate and handsome and fun and intelligent and caring and all of those things that we look for in a spouse. But he was decidedly a business-oriented person. We built our marriage around his endeavors in business school and then him launching into the private sector in consulting and then in private equity. His work sent us around the globe. We lived in London for 6 years. 2 of our 4 children were actually born in London. I stepped out of the workplace when we had 2 young children and we were transitioning to London because I felt that being in a foreign country and with the demands on his job, it was critically important for me to be the COO of Youngkin Inc. And so I say all this as a backdrop because that was really systems that we had put in place in our marital dynamic, in our family dynamic, and certainly in the infrastructure that was around us as a couple. And so when Glenn stepped into his role as co-CEO of the Carlisle Group in the context of COVID, and found himself on the other side of screens on Zooms, managing this global entity, he knew that the COVID trajectory was going to take Carlisle in a long and very different direction. He felt as if he had poured his life's work and his soul into Carlisle. He had a wonderful co-CEO partner, and that Carlisle was in a healthy position. And he did. I think God put on his heart a hunger to do more in the space of philanthropy and service. And he heard me tell the story, Nancy, that he came to me on a Friday and said, I'm going to retire this weekend, and I believe that I've been called into public service. And I said, wait a minute, time out. I think you're having a midlife crisis. This cannot be happening. And despite my surprise, he did exactly what he said he was going to do. And we put a lot of prayer and a lot of thought into that time. And when he announced in 2021, it was really an earthquake for us, for our family and as a couple. And yet I am really seeing the fruits of what I thought was a sort of barren tree come to bear at this time.
So there must have been trade-offs. I know a tiny little bit of what you went through during the campaign because my husband was also in politics at one time before there was internet or cell phones. So it was a different time, but I can remember having a child, him being away campaigning, being asked to do different things. And that balance, juggling all that wasn't easy. And so how do you manage so many different priorities, which I think also translates to busy women in general. And at the end of the day, we're the ones that are going to the grocery store and fixing dinner. How do you manage all those many priorities?
Well, sometimes I don't manage it well. And I think any woman out there can identify with that feeling of a little waywardness, of not quite knowing how you can meet the needs of all the various entities that need you at a given moment. I think the most challenging thing for me right now, and then I'm going to answer your question about the campaign, is that Glenn's career has always been fast and furious. The amount of energy that he is pouring into his service as the 74th governor really is very parallel to what he did at the Carlisle Group and in other areas of his life. He was gone quite a bit. He traveled quite a bit. There were phone calls late at night, early in the morning. So the pace at which he is moving and the amount of time that we actually get together as a couple has not been radically transformed. But what has changed, Nancy, is that whereas for the last 18 some odd years, we've been able to divide and conquer. And like I said, I've been the COO of Youngkin Inc., dealing with, I giggle all the time. I'm like, yes, I was the logistics coordinator. I was the nutritionist. I was the accountant.
Yeah.
You get the gist.
I did it right.
In that role, I did not have a specific job task associated with his work life. So other than supporting him and occasionally traveling with him and or being present when he needed a sounding board or when there was a investor conference or something, there were really I was not accountable in his work life. And now I find myself with really a full-time job, a glorious position that is a tremendous blessing, but one that there's really no preparation for, no training for, no handbook for, a limited number of role models for. And so it has been a challenge for me to try to decipher precisely what it is that I need to be doing to really be a gift, both to my husband and to all of the people that he's serving. And so I'm finding my way very, very slowly. One bit of encouragement that I would give to women that find themselves in similar situations, whether that's because they've had to step back into the workplace out of necessity, whether they're preparing to go to work as a young woman, whether they're finding themselves in a brand new leadership role in an organization that they've been wedded to for a long time, is to find your touchstone. So for me, my touchstone is communing with my animals. And I know that sounds silly and simple, but it really is. I'm a lover of nature. I'm a lover of animals. We have 3 dogs, multitude of horses. I have 4 canaries. We had a rescue rabbit up until last year. Our house is sort of a menagerie of animals and barks and birds tweeting all the time. And for me, I find that to be settling. I find that to be a touchstone. And so when I leave in the morning, or when I come home in the evening and the dog is in my lap, or when I'm able to retreat and go on a trail ride on my horse, or I'm able to feed my birds, that actually fills me up. That renews me. And so I would just encourage women to find their funny, funky little touchstone and try to infuse that into their daily lives.
And you just mentioned diversity, and I know both you and the governor have been very interested in inclusion, diversity, opportunity, and you've brought to the mansion for various functions people of all walks of life. But I want to sort of circle back to something that you have started that is, I think, an incredible gift, and that is the Spirit of Sisterhood Award, or the Spirit of Sisterhood. So can you talk a bit about what you've started there and what you see in terms of how that's going to affect women and women leaders in Virginia?
Thank you, Nancy, for mentioning that. When Glenn announced this candidacy, I was, what is the right word? I entered into all of this with a lot of trepidation. I had very narcissistic fear about our family, about our privacy, about what people would think of us because of political views and or advocacy in certain areas. And I have to admit, I didn't fully appreciate at the time the raw goodness of people. And so I give that sort of bleak backdrop to really focus on today what I know to be the truth, which is the vast majority of humans, both in the Commonwealth and in our world, are filled with goodness. They are filled with a real distinct hunger to commune. God hardwired people physiologically and emotionally to be in community with one another. And so as I traveled around the Commonwealth and listened to what women in particular were wanting, it became very clear that when women were wanting a place, a happy place to come together and to problem solve and to join forces to really make change for good. And we were all finding ourselves, women in particular, were finding themselves in their homes, homeschooling children, worried about elder care, taking care of the health and wellness of their communities, of their neighborhoods. And 3.5 million American women dropped out of the workforce during the COVID pandemic because they felt a responsibility at home and in their communities. And so really, as we talk about sisterhood, it almost is a dual track. On one level, it's this coming back together as we learn how to be healthy together and be in the same rooms at the same places with one another. So it's this sense of belonging and this sense of fellowship that we're all now able to engage in as we get out of the pandemic, and recognizing how critically important that is to so many for emotional well-being. And then secondarily, there's a sisterhood component in our politics. So what has happened, I believe, in the public square is that we have figured out ways to really make certain issues very, very divisive to the point where we've lost recognition that at the core, we all have basic sets of values. We were all made in the image of God. Women can disagree day in, day out about the way that certain things should be addressed in our politics, but never can we disagree that as sisters in Christ, sisters in motherhood, sisters in daughterhood, sisters in sisterhood, that we have an obligation to support one another despite our differences. And so I really feel like this is a moment in time, Nancy, where we can have those really healthy conversations about communion and about conversation. And so I'm just trying to foster those wherever I go. And I found a lot of receptivity and a lot of encouragement for what we're trying to do.
I so appreciate that you're using your voice and your platform to lift up women. It's just been a wonderful thing to watch, so incredibly important. What I find sometimes is that women, especially younger women, can't find their voice, are perhaps reluctant to speak up or to put themselves forward. And I don't know if you've had that experience. I think I certainly have at one time or the other. Do you have suggestions for young women about how they can find their voice, what they should be doing to speak up, to be engaged?
Yeah, I have a distinct concern, if I'm honest, that we have set expectations for ourselves just a little too high. And that may be counterintuitive. I know that young women today are told that the sky's the limit, they can break the glass ceiling, that they should be empowered to do more and to be extremely vocal. And I agree with all those things. I think power of the female collective is very fierce and very vibrant, just like it has always been. But I do think that we need to set very realistic expectations for ourselves, and that we need to laud ourselves more for the baby steps that we take to make differences in this world. There's a book that I love. It's called Church of the Small Things, Nancy. It's written by a woman in Texas from San Antonio. Her name's Melanie Shankle. I am not in a season of life where I can read lots of books. I will readily admit that. But this is a very easy read. I read this a couple years ago. And the gist is this, that our life's work and our life's impact is largely made up of the cumulative force of the little things. And so I think too often we are focused on these lofty goals, whether that is a promotion in the workplace, whether that is a accomplishment of our child, whether that is a title that our spouse or someone we know intimately in our family gets, whether that is the adoration of someone because of our external beauty, etc. And we fail to recognize that the little things that we do each day that bring another human being joy, or that help an elder, or that move the needle in our workplace in terms of making one of our colleagues feel better about his or herself, or the food that we take someone at the holiday time, or cleaning up someone in our household's dirty dishes who just can't seem to do that. Serving them in that way starts to build a narrative in our life of giving, a narrative in our life of excellence, a narrative in our life of trying to move toward being the best woman we can be. And therefore, we've got to celebrate those little things.
I love that we've had a conversation that's gone all over the board.
You know,
You've shared, I think, great stories, many that are practical for women and women who are burgeoning leaders, as well as us old timers. And you said it, I think funky, fun, a lot of enthusiasm, excitement, but you're real. And I think that you're sharing with us that whatever life throws your way, find your voice. And your last comment, my last comment to you might be, if you're going to write your story, you're looking back, what would the title of your story be?
I think the title of my story might be something like Special Surprises.
Special
For
surprises.
Suzanne. Maybe we'll keep with the S's. Special surprises for Suzanne. You know, my life really has been a wonderful, magical journey of special surprises. And that encompasses everything from the opportunity as a little girl to get to go to a summer camp, thanks to my grandparents paying for it, where I was exposed to horses for the first time and really found one of my passion projects, to meeting and marrying Glenn, who was so different from many of the people that I knew growing up in small town Texas, to living overseas, something I never dreamed I would get to do, and being exposed to different cultures and different ways of life, to residing in our nation's, probably one of our nation's most important commonwealths, to now finding myself in a position of leadership that I fell into. And of course, last but not least, being a mother and a wife and a member of a vibrant, active, ever-evolving, amazing family.
Thank you so much, First Lady Suzanne Youngkin. What an incredible story. I've loved this afternoon with you. and special surprises. And you are indeed a special surprise for all of Virginia. Thank you so much for your time today. Can't wait to see you in person soon.
Yes. Please come back and visit us in Richmond. We'd love to see you.
Thank you.